Hey there, quick note before we dive in. What you're watching right now is a lesson from one of my courses that I've decided to release completely for free here on YouTube so you don't have to pay a dime. So instead of asking you to buy my course, if you want to show your appreciation, here's a couple of things that you can do. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to my channel. These small actions tell YouTube to share my content with more people, which is a huge help. Also, feel free to check out my recommended equipment links in the description below. If you do purchase equipment from these links, I do get a small commission at no extra cost to you whatsoever. Or if you want to, you can leave me a super thanks or even just hit play on one of my playlists. I know it sounds silly, but if you just hit play on one of my playlists and let it play in the background, even if you're not paying attention, it tells YouTube, hey, people are watching these videos. I'm going to push it out to more people. So even if you just want to do that, I would love it. I would appreciate it so much. And then lastly, if you're looking for more personalized help, I do offer private coaching that you can find in the description of this video. Either way, I really appreciate you, whether you choose to do one of these things or not. Just by simply watching this video, it means a lot to me. Thank you so much. Now, let's get to the lesson. Okay, so let's break down the basic parameters of the majority of compressors out there. You'll see threshold, ratio, attack, release, and makeup gain. Those are the most common parameters you'll see on a compressor. So let's break them all down and learn what they do. All right, so when you hear the word threshold, what do you think of? You likely think of the word limit or another word that has a similar meaning, right? Well, the threshold of a compressor is just that, a limit or threshold. The threshold of a compressor determines when the audio will be compressed. In other words, this setting tells the compressor when to start working on the audio. For example, if you set the threshold to -12 dB, any audio that tries to go above -12 dB on your meter will be pushed down by the compressor. So it's basically saying, hey, when the audio I'm recording tries to go past -12 dB on my meter, I need you to not allow some of that audio to pass beyond that threshold that I've set, which is -12 dB. Now, notice how I said some of that audio. To make sense of this, I need to jump over to a limiter real quick. A limiter is essentially a compressor on steroids. A limiter also has a threshold, and if you set a limiter's threshold to -12 dB, it wouldn't let any audio pass beyond that threshold. Whereas a compressor's threshold will actually allow some of that audio to pass beyond its threshold while stopping some of the remaining audio. But you're likely asking yourself, okay, James, if a compressor doesn't stop all of the audio from going past its set threshold like a limiter does, how do you tell it what to let pass through and what to stop? Well, this is where ratio comes into play. The ratio on a compressor determines how aggressive the compressor's threshold will be. Now, does it make sense? If the threshold on a compressor will actually allow some of the audio to pass beyond while stopping the remaining audio, what determines the amount that will pass through and the amount that will be stopped? The ratio does. So now that we know what the ratio does, let's break down how to set it and what each setting actually does. When looking at a ratio on a compressor, you will likely see 2 times 1, 3 times 1, or 4 times 1, and so on. Let's take 2 times 1 as our example. A ratio of 2 to 1 means for every 2 dB that exceeds the threshold, it's only going to allow 1 dB to pass through. Now, let's make this even easier to understand. So you have 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, and so on. But these numbers are just fractions. 2 to 1 is just 1/2. 3 to 1 is just 1/3, and 4 to 1 is just 1/4. You get the idea. So now that we know these numbers are really just fractions, it makes everything so much more simple. So again, let's take 2 to 1 that we now know is actually just 1/2, and we know this means that for every 2 dB that tries to exceed the set threshold, it will only allow 1 dB to pass through, which is 1/2. So now, if I set my threshold to -20 dB, and the audio I recorded was going all the way up to -10 dB, with my ratio set to 2 to 1, it would only allow 5 dB, or half of the audio, to pass through, meaning the audio coming through would only make it to negative 15 dB rather than negative 10 dB, because a ratio of 2 to 1 only allows half of the audio to pass beyond the threshold. Now, if this is rattling your brain, it's okay. Compression took me a while to understand because I didn't have it broken down like this, and even with it broken down like this, it may take a few times of going through this part of the video to have the light bulb go off, but I assure you, it will. The attack function on a compressor controls how fast the compressor will begin to clamp down on the audio once it's been triggered. So, how fast will it begin compressing your audio? I like to use extreme examples to explain things sometimes. So, for example, if I said the word plosive and I had my attack time set all the way down to 0 milliseconds, it would immediately begin compressing my audio, which would result in the word plosive now sounding like plosive. You see how all of a sudden the P sounded really quiet or like it was completely gone? That's essentially what the attack time does, how fast it will begin compressing the audio. Now, will it actually cut off the beginnings of your words that drastically? No. But it's a very easy way to explain what the attack time does. In a lot of cases for dialogue, for content creation like YouTube videos and podcasts, I actually set my attack time all the way down to 0 milliseconds. The release does the exact opposite of the attack. The release determines how long it will take the compressor to release the audio from being compressed. I usually keep this around 100 milliseconds for dialogue. Now, we wouldn't want this all the way down to 0 milliseconds because if we had our attack all the way down at 0 milliseconds, the compressor will begin immediately compressing your audio, but also at the same time immediately let go of the audio from being compressed, and that would result in some really weird artifacting in your audio. Output gain, also known as makeup gain, allows you to turn up the volume lost after compression. So remember how compression turns down the loudest parts of your audio? Well, if you want to make that loss of volume back up to where it was previously, you'd want to increase this to taste. Most likely, you'd want to increase this by how much the audio was turned down by the compressor. So as you can see, if I keep my output gain or makeup gain at 0 dB, when I compress the audio, it squashes everything down. Well, before delivering my audio for YouTube, Instagram, iTunes, or whatever platform, I need to bring this volume back up. Well, if I increase my output gain to 5 dB once I apply the compressor, it turns the audio back up and is now much more full sounding than it was previously. In the next video, we'll bring everything all together to help make even more sense as to why you'd want to use compression on your audio.